Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about something a little bit controversial, perhaps to some, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot the last few years, especially after we moved out to the country, and that is 5.56, and does it really make sense as your primary go-to rifle? And I'm talking about something more than self-defense. I'm talking about shiznit hits the fan, a do-all rifle, something that if you could just own one, what would be the best option for you? Taking all things into consideration. It seems like a lot of folks seem to focus on the self-defense aspect of it. And a lot of folks in the community seem to focus on military tactics, team tactics, things that may not really apply in the civilian world. People that go out and get training in team tactics and room clearing and stuff like that. A lot of fun, very interesting knowledge, good knowledge to have. But in a real world scenario, gunfights are something you should probably try to avoid. And so your not just defensive rifle, but again, your go-to rifle, your do-all rifle has to be a pretty diverse firearm if it's going to be effective in many, many roles outside of self-defense, which 99.9% of the time you should be trying to stay out of gunfights because gunfights will end you. So avoiding them is probably your best option. So your rifle is probably going to wind up doing a lot of sitting around or being used for things like hunting and stuff like that. So 5.56 might not be ideal depending on where you're located, and that's what we want to talk about in today's video and where I've landed in terms of go-to rifles these days as of 2023, the summer of 2023. So with all that being said, guys, if you like political commentary, satire, sarcasm, check out The Second Legacy. It's a channel here on YouTube that I've collaborated with Braden, and Braden's from Langley Outdoors. And we do all sorts of great videos, including a call-in show where you guys can actually call in and talk to us and ask questions or just have a conversation about 2A issues. So I'll put a link in the video description below. All right, let's get started with today's video. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. So you guys know that Jason and I travel around the country shooting videos, doing all sorts of stuff, and we have a lot of conversations. And those conversations are really good conversations around everything from what's popular, how modern manufacturing's failing us, all sorts of stuff, right? But one of the things we always talk about are go-to weapons and, you know, what does a self-defense type situation look like in the United States as a civilian? Now, again, as I've already said, I don't want to downplay the importance of having as much knowledge as possible. So going out and getting training in team tactics and room clearing and stuff like that is good knowledge to have. But there's a tendency to focus on that. If you take a look at a lot of content creators on the internet, they focus on square range stuff, shooting at static targets, and worry about split times and how fast they can run through a known course and how many times they can rehearse it and then post the video of the fastest time. And that's great entertainment. And it's not even horrible training. It's good to have, but just simply focusing on that, thinking that when you get into a self-defense situation, you're going to have full battle rattle on, armor plates, distraction devices, smoke grenades, 15 magazines, a rifle with thermal and night vision and all this stuff. That's just not practical. We just came out of the first time I've ever experienced anything like this in my life, the whole COVID thing, when we had the whole pandemic and the shutdown of the government and all the craziness that ensued for the 2 years after that or more. And still, we didn't see roving bands of marauders knocking off people's homesteads and, you know, raiding buildings and stuff like that for the most part. So those types of tactics, those team tactics and things like that and full battle rattle defensive measures just didn't happen. What's most likely to happen, just on statistics, is that you're going to be at the grocery store wearing a t-shirt and pair of shorts and have a handgun on. And you're going to find yourself in a self-defense situation, which is still highly unlikely, but it's more likely to go down this way where you're in the shorts and a t-shirt with a handgun defending yourself or your family or loved ones, and you're not going to be kitted out in full battle rattle. It's not like you're going to walk into a store robbery and say, wait right here, and then run out to your truck and throw on all your kit and run back in the building and save the day. It doesn't work that way in real life for the most part. So when trying to choose a rifle, like many of you, I grew up with 5.56. I shot it. My first centerfire rifle was an AR-15. I love the AR-15. I've had great luck with it. But also in my adult life, I've hunted with the 223. I've even hunted deer with 223. And let me tell you, unless it's a medium to small size deer, 5.56 is just okay. I can kill a deer with a 22 long rifle. Doesn't mean I'm going to choose a 22 long rifle to go do it. Shot placement plays a big role in that. And 223 is no different. I shot a buck and a doe on the same hunting trip, and the doe, the bullet punched right through and actually got blood on the other side, but the buck didn't. The bullet didn't make it through, and it was not a long shot. It was inside of 100 yards. So 223 is not ideal. 223 was developed as a varmint cartridge, and I've even gone out and hunted prairie dogs with it, and I'll never do it again. It is annoying. Why? Because where you typically hunt prairie dogs, it's wide open spaces, lots of wind, and if you're shooting 200, 300, 400 yards, you can literally take a shot and your bullet will miss the target by feet because of the wind. Where I live out here, I have wide open spaces and high wind most of the time. So 5.56 at distance isn't going to serve me well. And so thinking about all that stuff, 5.56 is great for recoil. It's great, if you're new to shooting, you can carry a lot of ammunition for it. The rifles tend to be lightweight. There's a lot of positives to it, but there are also downsides, and it doesn't necessarily make the best cartridge. So rifles like this is a gun that, this is the MCX, big fan of it. I've moved from AR-15s to MCXs, and for a while, this MCX Virtus was my go-to rifle. I've also played with 300 Blackout, 6 ARC, all sorts of cartridges, right? And there's a lot of things to take into consideration. The rifle itself, the cartridge, how available is the cartridge? What loads are available for the cartridge? How expensive is the cartridge? Can you walk into any store in America and find that cartridge? These are all things that you need to consider. These are reasons why you don't see me rocking a 6mm ARC, because 6mm ARC isn't something I walk into Walmart and purchase. I can walk into Walmart and get some 308. I can even walk in and get some 5.56. So these are all things you have to take into consideration when looking at that go-to rifle. Let's call it a go-to rifle because its purpose is much greater than self-defense. I may have to take a deer out here in the wide open spaces of Indiana. Matter of fact, I did during the pandemic. I was hunting to actively feed my family because meat was expensive and in short supply. So I increased the number of deer I took during the pandemic. Shooting out here, if I had to take a deer at 300 yards, which is very possible with a 5.56, would be difficult. It would not be ideal. Therefore, I'd probably go with something else. And I am going with something else. Let's talk about that. So if 5.56 isn't the right answer, perhaps 300 Blackout is the right answer for what I need. Now, if you take a look at this Virtus compared to this one, the differences between them are many, but this is the new Spear style Virtus. This is the older MCX, and this one's in 300 Blackout, this one's in 5.56. Now, 5.56 really needs a longer barrel to meet its best performance metrics, right? The more you shorten the 5.56, the less effective it becomes, especially at range. So in shortening the barrel, why do we do that? We want smaller, lighter, handier weapons for CQB, keeping a weapon inside of a vehicle, things like that. So I was thinking, well, maybe 300 Blackout would be the solution. And so I've played with a lot of 300 Blackouts. And this is one of my favorite 300 Blackouts. This one has a 9-inch barrel on it. And the nice thing about 300 Blackout is you can shorten that barrel. And 300 Blackout is designed to operate an 8+ inch long barrel. So 8 inches at the shorter end, but if you go out all the way to 16 inches, you still increase the velocity. So you do increase the performance of the cartridge with the longer barrels, but as a shorter barrel, it is much less affected negatively by that shorter barrel than 5.56 is. So a 5.56 with a barrel length like this wouldn't be useless, but it's less than ideal. The concussion, everything about it is just not ideal. So 300 Blackout, great for small guns like this. It'll work great. This is an SBR, a factory SBR, and so it has a nice short barrel, and I can make up that difference. So if you see it next to its 16-inch counterpart here, you'll notice it's just a little bit shorter, but it has that suppressor on it. And the suppressor can come off very easily, and for storage or whatever. This is a factory muzzle device and a factory SIG suppressor, U-tube. So these two were designed together. I've not modified this weapon in any way, so please don't ding me with some sort of a rule violation. So now you can see that the weapon is much shorter, and it comes to performance, this gun is going to be comparable to this gun with its 300 Blackout chambering. Now 300 Blackout is really cool because 300 Blackout allows you to run either supersonic loads or subsonic loads. And so the supers are going to give you great terminal performance. They have a better sectional density than 5.56, and many hunters will tell you that the Super 300 Blackouts will be better for taking deer, at least at intermediate ranges, than 5.56. I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole and make a decision there, but 300 Blackout is still quite effective. What I really like about it, operates great with a short barrel, still has the same lightweight and familiar controls and size of a 5.56 version rifle, and the 300 Blackout also has that ability to go subsonic. So with subsonics, I can be discreet if I have to. If I have to take a shot and don't want to alert my neighbors that I've done something, fired a gun for some reason, or I just want to blow my eardrums out inside of the house, 300 Blackout with subsonics and a suppressor is hard to beat. The downside to 300 Blackout is that it just doesn't have the same acceptance as 5.56. Most places will carry 300 Blackout. Big box stores like Cabela's and Bass Pro will carry 300 Blackout, but you might not find it at your local Rural King or at your local Walmart. So it might be a little bit harder to find, and then the cost of the ammunition is going to be higher than 5.56, generally speaking. So there are downsides to 300 Blackout, but it still doesn't give me a major leg up in range, in terms of a barrier penetration, in terms of bucking wind at distance. It doesn't give me a big benefit there. There are other cartridges out there that you should consider, and the cartridge that I'm moved to, is 30 caliber in size, but it's a good old-fashioned 308. Let's take a look at that next. Here I have a 5.56, a 300 Blackout, and a 308 Winchester. The 308 is 150 grain Federal American Eagle, commonly available, relatively affordable, and that's the cartridge that the SIG Spear shoots. Now, the SIG Spear was designed to operate with a 6.8 by 51, which is even more powerful than 308, but it's not commonly available. Matter of fact, the conversion kits for these guns, to my knowledge, still aren't available on the civilian market, so 308 is kind of where we're at. Even if 6.8 by 51 were available today, it became available tomorrow, I still wouldn't choose it as my primary go-to cartridge, simply because it's a brand new cartridge. The cost is going to be outrageously expensive. It's going to be in limited supply. All the reasons why I said I wouldn't use a 6 ARC would apply to the 6.8 by 51. 308 in 2023, for me, given my location and my needs, makes far more sense than the other cartridges we've talked about in today's video. So if you take a look at a 5.56, just a standard M193 ball round, which most people are going to buy, or even weaker because of cost, things like Wolf and stuff like that, the M193 and the M855, which is a 6.2 grain green tip ammunition, are going to be the most common. And in terms of power, they're going to be fairly comparable. So the 300 Blackout, the 5.56 is going to give you, with this 55 grain bullet, about 1,755 foot-pounds of energy. A 300 Blackout with a 125 grain bullet is going to give me 1,360 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, and then the 308 is going to give me 2,650 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, so it has 1,100 foot-pounds more muzzle energy than the 5.56. So, and then, of course, considerably more than the 300 Blackout. So the 308 definitely gives you power, but how is that power useful? Well, where I live, again, we have high winds, good distances, so for hunting, which will be probably the most likely thing I would do in a shiznit hits the fan type situation, because I'm going to do everything I can to stay out of gunfights, I'm going to want something like the 308 out here, which is why I've moved over to the 308. Now, can I use this weapon as a CQB weapon? Absolutely. So this one is also a factory SBR. So it has the side folding stock on it. And once again, this has an integral setup for a suppressor. So this is a factory muzzle device. Good luck getting that off, even if you wanted to change it yourself. And this is a factory suppressor YouTube. So this was designed to operate together. I've not modified this weapon in any way. So if you take a look at the size of this, it is heavier than a 5.56 or 300 Blackout, but it's not prohibitively heavy. This is no different than an M14, M1 Garand, or any of the battle rifles that we used in major conflicts going back through the history of our nation. So saying that it's too heavy to be practical is just, it's not true. It is very practical. So the nice thing about the SIG Spear is that it gives you a modern weapon system. So the SCAR does as well. SCAR's another great option if you're looking for a 308 battle rifle. But I have chosen the SIG simply because this one is an SBR, and I like the controls. I really like the way the gun shoots. I've never been a huge fan of the SCAR. I don't like the 5.56 SCAR. I do like the 308 SCAR. You have the use of standard P mags. In this case, I have a Lancer magazine. You can get 25 round magazines, very common, easy to come by, not super expensive. And just overall, as you can tell by the way I have this weapon set up, this is my go-to gun. That's why you see the light on it, the pressure switch. That's why you see the suppressor, the optic, all that stuff. This is what I would use if I had to use a weapon for shiznit hits the fan. Now, the nice thing about modern 30 cals like this one is that they're not going to beat you to death. So you might think that the recoil on something like this would be too heavy. It just really isn't. Very pleasant shooting gun, and it's just amazing. So if I was going to use this in CQB, I could do that, especially with the suppressor on it with the shorter barrel. I can maneuver through a house with this very carefully, or very cautiously, and still be able to clear corners and not have, you know, a big, long Civil War era looking rifle. I can also take this off if I want to shorten it some, but I also can control that concussion that the 308 would have out of this barrel length with the suppressor on it. And once again, if you were to take a look at this next to a 16-inch barreled 5.56, you can see with the suppressor in place, it's not that much bigger with the SBR. So this whole setup is ideal for me. Now, what is not ideal about an SBR is that crossing state lines becomes complicated, right? Especially if you're not an FFL SOT. I'm an FFL SOT, but just a regular, you know, citizen with an SBR, it becomes problematic. But in a shiznit hits the fan where you have societal collapse, whatever, laws and rules really aren't going to apply, and I wouldn't care so much about crossing the Illinois border with a rifle if I had to in such a situation. So you can kind of offset some of the legal concerns by thinking about it that way. But I really have no need to leave Indiana that I can foresee. I'm certainly not going to bug out because everything I own is right here in the house. I'd rather shelter in place unless I'm forced out by fire or something like that. I don't really plan on bugging out. Where I'm going to bug out to a cornfield in downstate Indiana, live in a cornfield for years, it just doesn't work that way for me. So the 308 makes a lot of sense. And once again, I can pick up magazines, ammunition, accessories, because a lot of the stuff that you'll find for the 5.56 is going to work on a rifle like this. And so I can pretty much configure it any way I want and have common access to ammunition and magazines. And the ammunition is going to give me what I need in terms of ballistic performance. So what do you guys think? What do you think of the 308? Is it something you're considering? The military is moving away from 5.56, at least it claims to be. I don't really foresee that happening anytime soon, but they're moving more towards a weapon system like this. Is that going to change your opinion? Are you going to look more at 308, more at 6.8 by 51, 6.5 Creedmoor, great cartridge, but like 300 Blackout, you're not going to find it on every store shelf. It's great. The prices are coming down. I do think it's superior to 308. But again, you have to take into consideration cost and availability. 6.5 Creedmoor doesn't trump 308 when it comes to that. So what do you guys think? Are you considering a 308? Would you rock a 308 versus a 5.56 based upon your needs? Comment down below. I enjoy reading those comments. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms channel so we can continue to bring you content like this, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got a thanks and a join button right underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash either one of those buttons. You can help support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Last but not least, please swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 15 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.